For me, there's no other option. And I did the days in bed, and I did the days, had some really, really dark days. Every single thing in your life changes when you lose your person.
You can drink, I guess. You could take pills. You could stay in bed, or you could exercise.
Is to always come back to gratitude and always come back to love. Use the Spartan Way to get through grief.
Welcome to the Hard Way podcast with Joe Sena, founder and CEO of Spartan Races. We're teaching you how to overcome your obstacles in your life the same way we teach our 10 million plus Spartans to overcome obstacles on the course. With insight from the smartest, most accomplished experts from every corner of the world. Get ready to elevate your life today.
Joe Sena here, CEO and founder of Spartan and host of the Hard Way podcast. I've got my pal Kim Pastore on the phone. She's got a story to tell. And hopefully everybody is sitting down for this one because she's gone through some tough times over the last year. But I think we can find some strength here. Welcome aboard, Kim.
Thank you, Joe. Great to be here.
So your husband, George, had a dream. Tell us what happened.
So my husband, George, was a firefighter and paramedic in Florida. And after the Pulse nightclub and Parkland shooting, he started to become a little frustrated with the police not being able to get in there and neutralize the threat right away, or the paramedics having to wait for the police. So they've started to do a lot where they've made law enforcement and firefighters and paramedics kind of all either work together or what's called a tactical medic. So you can kind of neutralize the threat and also save lives. So he worked to kind of do those things in Florida, but it wasn't quite what he wanted. And so he had seen something about APD SWAT. And he said, that's where it's at. That's what I want to do. Long story short, we moved out to Austin. He quickly pursued his dreams of all of those things and got onto the SWAT team.
Not easy, though, to get on the SWAT team.
It's not easy, but that's right up George's alley. The crazier, the harder, that's just him. He's going to stay ultra focused, find the right people, get the right mentors, figure out where he needs to be, get in trainings that he shouldn't have even been in. Get people to let him do things. Everybody would say, how'd you even get in this training? How'd you get here? How'd you do this? And he was just eye on the prize, hyper-focused all the time. Nothing got in his way. And he was able to get there very quickly. George lived kind of fast and hard, and nothing could stop him. Fun being married to him, as you can imagine. Couldn't really get in that guy's way, but he was always so motivational. And so I was super proud of him, happy to support him. And on November 11th, he got a call. There was a SWAT, there was a hostage rescue call. A gentleman, I say gentleman, I don't even know why I said that, stabbed his sister, who then called 911. She was able to get out of the house. Patrol showed up. The suspect fired at them, called SWAT out. And he had then stabbed his mother and his brother. So there were hostages dying in the home. So by the time SWAT got there, it was a no-brainer. They just go in. They do what they do. They just go in an attempt to save the hostages and neutralize the threat. Unfortunately, George and one of his brothers were killed or shot. Fortunately, John, I'm so sorry. I tried to.
It's okay. That's okay. You're getting me to tear up. Well, I'm sure people listening are tearing up.
It's rough, but so John and George were shot. I shouldn't have probably said his name. He's recovering well, thankfully. George was killed. Fortunately, all the other officers made it out okay. We're not really sure how or why, which is a lot to do with what I have done since his death and sacrifice to continue on the way he would want for others to continue on. It was not by chance that it was him. You know, as you look at things unfolding, you think, why or how did this happen? And I never really did that. I just thought this was how it was supposed to be. And for him, it was beautiful. Everybody knows now that he had a tattoo on his chest that said, "Protect my brothers, everyone goes home." And I never understood it really, truly until that day. And, it's our worst nightmare. We think about getting that knock on the door. He was also an honor guard for both fire and police. So I've attended many funerals and always thought how horrible it must be to be those people in the front row and what that must feel like. And I hope that I'd never had to feel that. So as you can imagine, when I got that knock on my door and thought there's no way, he just left a little bit ago. And these SWAT calls typically take so long. I figured it was an early Amazon delivery or something. And they kept knocking, and I went to the door and peeked out and saw nine, I think it was 8 or 9 officers and chief outside the door. And it's still something that's good for me to talk about because it's still something that, wakes me up to a pounding heart. But, you open the door and you think, please don't let it be this. And she said, Kim, I'm so sorry. George was killed this morning during a hostage rescue call. And, your knees get weak, you get sort of nauseous, and you just, of course, your brain goes into disbelief and all the questions, how could this have happened? Did he do something wrong? All this training, how could this be? It's the one place I felt he was safe was on a SWAT call. And, everyone comes into your home and you just, it's interesting. I've really tried to understand grief the best that I can, because that day when I was trying to be strong and you want questions answered, I wanted to get to the hospital. I couldn't do that. I wondered where people were, what happened. Your brain just wants to answer so many questions. The first thing I thought about, being the empath that I am, is all the people who have had this happen to them and how I could have never imagined it feeling this way. And that all those people have made it, and I'll make it, and I'll be okay. I just need to figure out how to get through this. What's the next step? What do I do? Where do we go from here? And I have found, I woke up this morning actually thinking of you and this podcast and your listeners and thinking, how can I help the most people with this story and with what I'm doing and what we're going to talk about? And I love that you always delve into where people come from, where their grit comes from. And I've had so many people say, Kim, you're so strong. I don't know how you've done it. You've done such a great job. And, you need to take more time for yourself. You're going too fast. You're pushing too hard. And at first I listened, and then I thought, no, that's who I am. That's who I am. That's who George knows me to be. That's who he fell in love with. This is who I am. And I just can only be who I am. And it's interesting to think how your strength can sometimes make people feel uncomfortable because they don't understand it, or they need you to be a certain way for their comfort. People say very strange things to you during your grieving process. You feel like you need to act a certain way to honor that person. Again, you're pushing too hard, you're doing too much. I've really found that you kind of grieve the way you live, and you default to who you are. You default to that grit. You default to your strength. For me, there's no other option. And I did the days in bed, and I did the days, had some really, really dark days, where you just aren't real sure how you're going to live. Like, how do you live? Every single thing in your life changes when you lose your person. It's who do you text when you land safely? Who do you ask, what are we going to do for dinner? Your bed's empty at night, your bed's empty in the morning. And it gets rough, it gets dark. And you kind of just think, well, I have two choices. I think we all know the best one is to put your feet on the floor and move forward every day. And then you find what works for you. You find, I don't want to say what makes you feel good, but we're constantly seeking, how do we solve this problem? How do we feel better? How do we get to a space where we can move on through the day? And interestingly enough, grief has no end. I think what it is, it's a huge weight that just gets lighter as you get stronger and find the things that get you through it. And so through helping people and serving others, which is all George ever wanted to do, is what I have found to be the most healing.
Giving you the most strength to lift that weight.
Absolutely. And you find that your circle changes. You have people that drop off that don't know how to deal with it. I have friends that have told me, I've never seen you cry. I don't know what to do with this. I've never seen you like this. I've never had to help you. You help everyone else. And so I've also learned I have to let people help me because it's part of their healing journey too. That's been really challenging for me, to let people reach out and help and carry me forward. So really, as if I'm talking about anything, it's to talk about grief. I'm sure a lot of your Spartan family and people use the Spartan way to get through grief. I'm sure there are thousands of people that can relate to my story and how I say your physical shit takes care of your mental shit, right? It's no, I get up every day, I work out, I'll do a run, whatever my body motivates me to do. realizing now that nothing sucks as bad as grief. And grief has literally kicked my ass, and it does all day, every day. And you just have to find a way to, I don't know, get your mind clear. And that's what I think what you're doing is so great. And I'm certain there are tons of Spartans out there that used, your races to get them through their grief.
I run into people all over the world. I was just in Europe this weekend where some people come up and just start crying, and they're dealing with whatever they're dealing with, but this race helps them get through it. And I was going to ask you on that, I guess, help me here, because it happens. You've got a few options, right? People have a few options, not just you. You can drink, I guess. You could take pills. You could stay in bed, or you could exercise.
And I had all of those things. There's people that want you to do a number of those first three things. And people would say, it's okay if you go on meds. And I've had very few drinks just socially since then. And I was taking I don't know if I'm allowed to say it, but these gummy things to sleep. And I was like, I can't. And yes, I had trouble sleeping. I lost a bunch of weight. I couldn't eat. Going to bed was hard. Waking up was hard. I would literally wake up to my heart pounding through my pillow. It sounded like that bass in a car outside. And I was actually worried about my heart. I'd take my blood pressure and I would just, breathe through it, meditate, exercise. There was a 2-week period that I didn't exercise in the beginning just because it was pure chaos. And whenever you have a very public event like that, and the venue changed for the funeral, there was, I think, about 7,000 people in attendance. People came from Florida, SWAT officers, EMS, fire from everywhere, his honor guard team from firefighters from Florida. And George and I also owned a karate school. And so we had a lot of our karate students out there. And, while I'm on it, it's amazing what you're doing with the kids. We hosted and ran so many karate tournaments and so many black belt tests and physical challenges. And I got such a kick out of hearing some of your stories about, I can picture, I love the kids just snotting and crying and begging for mercy. And those kids to this day showed up for his funeral. They write their college essays on their experience they had with George and all of their hardships through those physical challenges have really set the baseline for what hard is for them. And to never quit, and I can't, were not words in their vocabulary. So it ties into George and just who he is and why it's so important, but also to thank you for what you're doing for the kids. I taught PE and fitness for kids, and it's so, so important because even these officers and veterans and all these people that I'm dealing with as I work through the foundation, and I can hopefully tell you about that in a minute, but especially as it comes to their mental and physical wellness, a lot of their trauma starts in their childhood. And so and really makes you the person that you are. And so although George and I had rough childhoods, I wouldn't change a thing because I know it's what made me who I am and what's getting me through what I'm getting through now. And I wouldn't change a thing. I actually feel sorry for people who don't have any adversity in their life or know what it really means to do something hard to get them through things like this.
It's funny because when I hear that, and I think my childhood was crazy, crazy town. And I wonder sometimes if I'm just so nuts because I somehow used it as fuel, and it didn't really. I don't see a negative effect. Everybody else probably sees a negative effect to my crazy childhood, but I had a crazy childhood. So I agree with you. We need, if we don't have what you and I had growing up and George had growing up, we probably have to manufacture some adversity in our life.
I tried to with my kids. I was always so worried they didn't have enough adversity. It was like, good, I'm glad you fell. Good, I'm glad you broke your arm, Good, I'm glad this was hard for you and you got your ass beat in sparring, and good. Like, I got punched in the face all the time. We were fighting in the streets all the time, There's people that have never been punched in the face. That just is shocking to me. And I mean, you've been punched in the face, right? So to be honest, I never reflected on it the way I have. And I'm not saying this to you for any other reason, but that I just happen to see what you're doing with the kids. And then just talking about the hard way and the way you get into people's childhoods on the podcast. I was actually nervous about it because I don't talk about it much. And some places you just don't want to go back to. You're like, it happened. It made me who it is. I'm moving on. You sound like you're whining. Like, yeah, we had no food. Yeah, we got kicked out of the house. We moved all the time. I never knew what school I was supposed to be at. It's not a whiny thing. And I never want anyone to feel pity on me because I'm so grateful now that I had that, to be honest with you.
I had a gentleman on my podcast years ago. He was adopted. And I guess the adoption process gets a little messy because families that are taking in adopted kids, in many cases, do it for the money. And so he got brought into some families that really didn't want him. They were just looking to collect the check. And then they would go on vacation with the money and leave him. And then they'd kick him out and he'd have to go to another. And he went through 3 or 4 of these situations where he would see the family pull away on vacation. And he's just looking out the window. And he ended up playing for the NFL. It's to your point, what are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with the adversity, right? And he used it in a positive way. Not everybody does, and everybody can. But what would you say to folks that are having a tough time? I mean, we've got somebody very close to me went through a really tough situation like you. What do you say? What do you recommend?
It's kind of cliche, but gratitude. Every time I felt at my worst, I just clicked to gratitude, whether it be grateful for the time I had with him, grateful for having the love of my life and experiencing that kind of love, because that is what makes the grief so much harder. It's kind of equivalent to the love. It's the love with nowhere to go. It's that heavy weight in your chest. So I would say gratitude for sure. I would say surround yourself with people who understand you, who support you. If you have to be something you're not to make people around you feel comfortable, they're probably not the best people to have around you. Some people have a tough time, trimming the fat, so to speak, when it comes to their circle. But the people that I thought might be there for me, and some people don't know how to show up for you, and you have to have grace and you have to forgive people who don't know how to show up. We don't talk about grief. There's people that say the wrong thing because they don't know what to say. There's people, and I don't know if this is your friend's situation, if it's a loss or a grief, or, people grieve for a lot of things. We grieve after a divorce. We grieve after we close a business. Maybe we grieve after our kids go to college. Being a human is deeply intense and emotional. So it's a beautiful thing that we can feel emotions, but there are times where it's so difficult. So I would say, without giving you the longest winded answer, is to always come back to gratitude and always come back to love. Stay away from fear and stay away from that. I don't want to say victim mentality in a negative way, but you can get in your head. And for some reason, our brains love to hook on to the negative. You hear one negative comment to 10 positive ones, and your brain just hooks onto that. So you have to fight against it. Your brain's like a muscle. If you get your biceps as big as you want your biceps, they're not going to stay that way unless you keep doing bicep curls. So I think with your mind, it's just a daily, if you accept the fact that it's a daily task to come from a place of gratitude and love and act accordingly and make your decisions accordingly, you will slowly make baby steps towards living a more fulfilling, meaningful life.
Yeah, I agree with that. What could we do for you? For everybody listening wants to help. What can we do for you? Tell us about the foundation.
George became a police officer after being a beloved karate instructor, beloved firefighter. We scratched our heads. We got here just in time for the protests, the defunding, COVID. It was insane. And so for his funeral, the SWAT team and Honor Guard decided to move his casket in the Bearcat, which is that big, cool green monster of a machine that the SWAT guys use. And George loved that. And I thought, wow, that's so great. And they moved him through downtown Austin, which was the area that he patrolled, which DTAC, it's the very busy area of downtown Austin. And quite frankly, I was really nervous about it because after seeing the protests and the sentiment towards police, I was worried that people would, throw things at the Bearcat or be grateful for what had happened. And so in stark contrast to that, there was a ton of people out. It was a 16-mile procession, people up on the overpasses, flags, people saluting, fire, veterans, military, police, kids with signs saying, "Thank you, Officer Pastore," and just the outpouring and all of the people at the funeral. I remember thinking, because it's a big blur, but I remember thinking, there's hope. there's people out there that do care about this. There's a ton of fallen officer organizations that reach out to families when this happens, and thank God for them. They do amazing work. They just flood to you, and when they say, you're now part of our family, they really mean it. And so I was so grateful for that, but I couldn't help but be really concerned for the officers who are still doing this very difficult job. It's very challenging. George had a rough couple of years, just navigating through like the times and what it means to be a police officer right now. And so I really couldn't help but want to do more for the officers who are still working, particularly the guys who had been a part of the call that night. And, they all just go back to work, have to push it down and hope for the best. And so shortly after his death in about February, I decided to start the foundation. The 3 pillars of the foundation are training. So George was passionate about training, getting into any training he could, staying ready, staying fit, testing his readiness, challenging himself, and always wanting to be better. So I thought, all these T-shirts and patches and coins, they're so appreciated. And I know everybody wants to do something. They just don't know what to do. And so I thought, if you're a police officer or a first responder, anything, get out there, sign up for a training on his behalf, take care of one another, take care of yourself, be better than you were yesterday. And that's how you can honor him. And so the first pillar of the foundation is based around training, providing funding for training where there's shortcomings in departments. Some departments have very small training budgets, and just helping in that. We've already sponsored 4 trainings. We've got 2 more on the books, and we already sponsored a police officer to head to New York for a training. So we're getting started, very small baby steps, but we're getting there. And then the second pillar is, I don't dare say mental wellness all the time, but for lack of a better term, wellness in forms of mental and physical. I'm kind of looking at I just got off a call with a great company who's working with first responders in a different and unique and more meaningful way to address their wellness and not sit down talk therapy. That generally doesn't work well for them. So wellness. And then the third pillar is the community engagement, and really trying to find a way to bridge that gap and get people to understand, maybe, get the community come down a notch, police to come up a notch, and how can we work together to be part of the solution? We need police. I think we all agree they deserve more training. We want them to be able to do the best possible job that they can. And so we are hosting our first annual Humble Warrior Games. I called to him and all of them my Humble Warriors out at the Reveille Peak Ranch, which Spartan is a friend of, and we'll be out there again in May. And it's just a 5K and an obstacle course challenge. And the idea was to get all first responders, military, and civilians together for about a half a day to really, in a more fun environment, spend the day together working on ways to be part of the solution, to let's fund some training. Let's say we care, and let's just work together to make a difference, to make it better for them. We need police officers. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. We need them. So let's take care of them so they can do the best possible job.
Well, we'll get folks that are in that area to get out there, and it sounds like you've got the uniform services in your pocket. So they'll come out.
You'll get to watch some SWAT teams do obstacle courses. We're going to have a tattoo guy out there. Staccato will be providing a shooting experience. They're one of our sponsors. We've got great prizes. And then also your team generously donated codes to Spartan and Tough Mudders for all of our people who have registered. So they've all been getting codes to your races. And I signed up for my first Spartan in March in Atlanta. So I'm looking forward to that. And I can't thank you and your team enough. And I think we're all in this together. And hopefully we can work together to make a difference. And we'd like to be all over the country hosting these Humble Warrior, even just a 5K, letting the community put it on, raise the funds, and keep those funds in their community to train their first responders so they can be a part of it too.
I love it. And how do people find you?
People find us J Pastore, Pastore, foundation.com. We're on Instagram too at George Pastore Foundation, and Facebook as well.
I love it. Well, thanks for coming on. I'm sorry you're dealing with this, but this too shall pass. It's not going to ever go away. Like you said, I love the weight analogy, but you'll be stronger to deal with it.
Absolutely. Joe, thank you so much. Thanks for all you do. Keep torturing those kids. I love it.
I'll never stop, including my own.
I love it.